Welcome back, guys, to the Undisputed Roundtable. Of course, we have myself, Edward, the content manager, Will Kinsler, the global communications manager, as well as Ash, the creative director, so that we could talk about our latest update that you guys are currently experiencing. So we basically want to touch on the things that you guys are reacting to in terms of that update, as well as ongoing areas of discussions that are popular amongst the community. So first topic we're going to talk about is, what do you think about the response to the latest update? What do we think about this, guys? What's the response we've been getting from the community regarding this latest update?
Well, I was totally shocked by it. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I think it went about how we expect.
Yeah.
I think every time we put out an update, and we've pretty consistently been doing that with like fighters and venues, it always drives players back into the game. And then when we're talking with our core community, there's a handful of issues or things that they care about that either we've done something when we ship an update to improve that, or we haven't. And so we're going to hear good things about the stuff that we've been able to do, and for the stuff we haven't been able to do yet, it's going to be, hey, what's going on with this? Why isn't this better? Or and so that was definitely the case with this one. Obviously, we shipped fighters, and Joe Calzaghe ended up being one that was used a lot and exciting to add to that division. But there's a bunch of other things, ongoing work that we've talked about in here that we haven't shipped yet. And so I think today we'll talk about a whole bunch of other things, but we're going to talk about some of that as well, just to make sure we're coming back and addressing those areas that people care about.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, because coming into the new updates is always very the curiosity factor is always there. What does this feel like? Is the AI now up to snuff? Like, people start thinking about little things that come within our updates, and also just playing the new fighters and looking at the new arenas. I think that's always exciting. So those things tend to bring players back. What do you think, Ash, about this new update and how people are receiving it?
Yeah, I think the key thing for us is just to keep working on the areas that people care about, right? So whether it's new fighters, new different venues that we add into the game, but also how we can just improve the actual mechanics in the game as well. So we have a roadmap, we have a number of things that we need to include in the game. So yeah, I think it's always an exciting time when we're putting an update out, and we're always trying to maximize the amount of content with each update. And I'm really excited about some of the upcoming updates as well, in terms of what the community's got to look forward to.
One thing I think about with updates, and I think it's sometimes as the developer, it's hard to totally grasp this, right? Because like you reference the roadmap, and we have a roadmap, right? And so we know the game that we're making, the game that we want to ship, right? We're in early access, but at some point we're gonna polish things, and we're gonna ship a game, and it's gonna come out, and we'll of course keep updating it. But in order to get there, there's a bunch of things that we know that we need to do in order to make that happen. As a player, your reference really is only, here's the latest update, right? And so I think we kind of recognize, when we're looking at the totality of all these things that we have to do, it feels like, well, okay, yes, we didn't do this yet, but we know that it's coming. And but as a player, you're still playing a game that's an incomplete game, right? It's not finished,
Yeah.
right? So some of the things that we talk about, it's like, yeah, you're right. If this thing still feels bad, you're hoping that it felt better with this update, but maybe that one thing's not going to feel better until next update, or 3 updates, or whatever it is. And I think that's like, yeah, it's just a little bit of a different perspective, because we understand, yep, we've got all these things. We believe, and we're confident we're going to be able to get them done before we ship the game, and that's part of it. But as a player, you're sometimes just wondering and waiting a little bit about, like, man, I hope that thing I really care about is in the next one.
Yeah, and speaking to that whole feeling of things being a little bit different, or not what people were expecting or seeing from previous things that we've put out even before the game released. we have a lot of talking. I wouldn't be doing my job if I'm not if I'm not talking about this, but people are talking about previous things that we've put out in terms of trailers, in terms of like even the way the things look, even the WBC arena, for example. That's one that people talk about. So Will has listed a bunch of things here in regards to that community feedback, and I want to know, Ash, let's talk about it. Let's go through the entire list. What do you think about these things? Are they different? Are they the same? Like, what's going on there?
I thought this is where I'm supposed to leave the room, no?
This is where the rest of us are looking to you on the call, because some of these, like for example, there's a lot of references to our July 2021 dev update, which is like quite literally the very first week that I started here. You know what I mean? So it's like I know about everything that's happened since then, but I didn't expect necessarily that we'd be talking about this one video that people love so much 2 years later. I wish I could take credit also for making that list. I didn't make that list. The Discord squad, Jay Soba, and some of the other folks on there made that list, and then I added a few other things to it.
You added to it. You added to it, Will.
Well, I added a couple of other things that just stuff I'm wondering about. Ash.
Oh, okay, nice one.
No, there were a couple things that weren't on the list, but that people have asked about that I'm like, oh, this probably goes in there too. So we'll jump right into it. I mean, there's some question about just the visuals of the game. And I know there's a number of things that can affect people's perception of what the game looks like and what the visuals are. And some of the frame of reference is like either that video that I just referenced, the July 2021, or I think the March one, the trailer that had like Adelaide and Eddie Hall in it. And, we do get comments from people saying like, hey, I feel like the game looked better than like what's going on with that. Is it a performance thing? Is it other changes that we've made in the game that are making people feel that way? What's going on there?
So, in terms of visuals, I genuinely think that, we've made some of the changes which I think impact how the game looks, right? Based on previous trailers and development videos we've put out. I think one of the crucial factors is our camera. The camera that was used in pretty much all of our previous dev videos was a lot closer than the camera that's currently used in the game right now. So at the moment, the camera that's used is quite far out. So you don't really get to see the same amount of detail like the previous videos showed, right? Where you really saw some up close action, where you can see everything from sweat, muscle flexing, just the impacts. Probably feel a little bit better when the action's close up. And it's kind of like if you're at a fight, right? If you're at 50 rows back compared to 10 rows back, the action will probably feel and look a little bit different. So whilst that's not the whole reason why the game does look different, it is certainly a big part of that. But at the same time, we ourselves as developers in the studio are looking at these videos and thinking, yeah, actually, the action does look better in those earlier videos. So how do we make those changes to get the camera, for example, back to how it was? But then the balance was, we were during the play tests, right? During that period, people were struggling with how much the camera was moving, right? Because our game is so fluid and fast as far as the fighter movements. You're able to pretty much dance around the ring pretty quickly, and with the camera system, we've just got to be really mindful of not making, whilst making one part of the game better, not making another part worse. So that is a pretty high on our priority list, because I myself feel the same. Right.
Yeah. Is there other stuff that we're looking there? I mean, the camera's obviously a big one. I think sometimes with arenas, people think about different things like the fog volumes or the lighting. I mean, Edward mentioned WBC specifically. Like, is there work on arenas that we could be doing as well?
Absolutely. So as far as arenas go, and this is a general venue and environment piece, we'll be doing a complete pass on all the venues. as far as the lighting goes. And yeah, I mean the volumetrics and the fog, it's one of those things where, you know, some people prefer it and you know, some people don't. But for sure, I think the lighting and you know, the visual kind of fidelity of our venues, that will have an additional pass during early access. Because yeah, I mean, look, I recorded most of that video back in you know, 22. So I can clearly see the differences. But you know, none of the things are, you know, outside of the realms for us to resolve, because we created them in the first place.
Well, what about the referee in the ring? Because that's one of the biggest things that people always say. Hey, you had a referee in the ring in all of those trailers. Because that's one of the things that we've seen from those trailers too. What's going on with that? Are we bringing him back in the ring, or is he just coming in for those scenes where he's looking at the cuts and all that stuff?
No, absolutely. So the referee will definitely feature in Undisputed. It's just a system where, again, because we've made the fighters so fluid, you know, the challenge, and it has always been a challenge actually since we implemented the movement system, where the referee's just not as fast as the fighters, right? You know, Kenny Bayless is moving as quickly as he can around the ring, making sure, you know, is keeping up with the fighters moving around, um, because it's, you know, essentially one of those systems whereby, you know, you could corner a referee and then it's like, okay, where does the referee go from here? So it's been a complex process for our programmers. And obviously, you know, we don't want to release an update where the referee still feels like there's issues. Obviously, we know early access is a period where we're gaining feedback from the community. But what I don't want to do is, you know, drop content and updates where we know there's problems, and then expect the community to kind of live with them, right? So we want to deliver a referee when we're happy with the quality and how the referee operates in the ring. But look, we've created a whole new AI algorithm for the referee now, and we're pretty happy with the initial results that we've seen so far. So yeah, look, the referee will be coming. Otherwise, Kenny Bayless is going to probably be having a few words with me.
Let's talk about slipping. That was one of the things in that July 2021 video that I think people really liked. And we get a lot of questions about slipping, or saying, hey, I felt like it may have been easier to slip earlier, like during the beta. And then I think the logical leap for a lot of people is, well, targeting must just be too high if I can't slip like I could before, or if I couldn't slip beautifully like Lyndon Arthur was doing in that video. How are we feeling about it, and why is that not just a simple thing for us to say, oh yeah, make it like the video?
So I mean, slipping is something that I mean, this topic is something that I've thought about quite a bit, and we will be making a couple of minor adjustments to the way slips operate. But overall, you know, the slip mechanic obviously is entirely different to, you know, the weave that we've got in the game now. You know, me personally, I think the way that slips have been designed in the game, they're almost something that you're going to anticipate, right? So it's, you know, unrealistic, I feel anyway, for you to like wait for an opponent to jab, and then you see that jab, and then you try to slip that jab after they've thrown that jab. It's in my view, you're not going to be able to slip that jab. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I think you'd need to have super fast reflexes for that to
Yeah.
happen. So
Yeah.
so for me, the slipping mechanic in the game is something that you're supposed to anticipate. As far as if somebody's, you know, throwing, you know, left hooks or you know, right straights, and you know, you're coming forward. It's always something where you're anticipating. So when I'm fighting, for example, you know, I'm slipping without a punch, or without the opponent even throwing a punch, right? Because I'm anticipating or thinking that this opponent's, based on how he's been fighting so far, is about to throw a punch. So so for me, it's more about anticipating the punch coming, for you to slip. But you know, having said that, obviously there's a balance between, you know, how accurate the opponent's, you know, punches are, right? Because on the other hand, it's unrealistic for a punch to change direction, to try and follow a slip. So that's an element we'll be looking at as far as how accurate those punches are when somebody is slipping.
And in terms of the video, right? I mean, I think people really like the way that it looked, right? But if I'm not mistaken, I think punch targeting has always been a part of our plan for the game and a fundamental part of how it works. But punch targeting wasn't fully implemented, right, when we shot that video. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so punch targeting in that particular video, it wasn't at a level that it is like in the game right now. And that's one of the areas that I mentioned
So
that we'll be looking to tweak.
can you talk about why punch targeting is important? Because sometimes what people say is like, oh, it would just be better without targeting. I suspect you can
The
tell us
Wild West.
why that's not the case, right? But like it's a fundamental part of how punching in the game works, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all want, fighters to feel individual and the stats to matter in the game, right? So if punch targeting wasn't a thing, then why would accuracy matter, right? So there's fighters in the game who have a higher accuracy stat because they're known to be real accurate punches, in boxing, and you have those that, aren't so accurate. So we just have to balance that between making sure that, accuracy doesn't negate, slipping, for example, right? So maybe now it feels like it's a little bit too overpowered when it does come to slipping. So there will be a few tweaks that we'll be making to that, but targeting is important, right? It's like you don't want to weave to one side and somebody throw a jab or a straight, and for that punch to always miss because there's no targeting because that person's just like weaved to one side. You can see the person's weaving to the left, so you're gonna punch that person as they're moving to the left, right? So
Retarded.
it's just that balance that we have to make, because if we didn't do that, then I'm sure we'd have people complaining that, hey, all my punches are missing.
Yeah, I think where we have it now, like we got to move a little bit closer to the middle, just like you said. You don't want it to be, you do want it to be where there's reads and anticipation that's creating your ability to move out of these punches or out of the way of these punches, but you don't also want it to be like you said, where somebody's just leaning and just holding a lean back and exploiting that. So there's that balance. We do want to get closer to the middle, I think, where there's more room for you to miss if the person weaves with the correct anticipation. But I definitely see where you're coming from. You don't want it to be just like the Wild West, basically, where you're just punching and missing because somebody just pressed one button and stayed there. But one other thing that they talked about too when it came to the videos that we've seen in the past and during the 2021 is the UI changes. They said that the UI changes back then look better than the UI changes now. Do you guys agree or disagree?
I mean,
Uh,
it's just like a personal preference thing. I mean, obviously we changed them. That kind of answers the question about what we
Yeah.
we're looking for in terms of vision and the style of the game. Obviously, there's a clear difference between the sort of clean look that we have now versus the grungier look, and it's just a direction thing, right, Ash? I mean,
Yeah, I think we made a conscious decision to change the look and feel of the game, and as part of the upgrades that have taken place with our game, right from the very beginning, we've gone through a number of iterations with regards to how the main menus look, through to the UI, in fight, and we did actually start off, with a pretty grungy looking feel to the game. But as the game developed and grew, and even changing the name from ESBC to Undisputed, right? I think just as part of that process, we upgraded everything along the way, and I think UI is just one of those subjective kind of feels where it's a direction that we wanted to take so that it fits closer to the overall style of the game. Because whilst we upgraded the menus and everything else, the UI in game all of a sudden looked a little bit dated. So we decided to change that up.
yeah. So short answer then being it's a subjective relative to all the
Artistic.
other things on the list. This is probably one that we feel good about. We're not going to go in a different direction, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
We'll stand by this one.
I mean, I like the new ones, but hey, listen, that's just me. So what about the cuts? Because there was a picture I remember not too long ago. There was a picture where somebody's eye was almost completely split open, and people, I guess, they saw that picture. They're reminiscing on that, and they want to know, are we going to get the damage system to that point? Is there something that we're missing? Is there something that we have to do to see something like that? So what's going on with the cuts? Why does it feel different for people now than it did when they saw it back then?
So I completely get that, actually, and I agree. One of the tricky things with having the number of licenses that we've got in the game, after that trailer had gone out, we did have a couple of conversations with a couple of the bodies, and it was a case of just, again, balancing that fine line between, hey, are we glorifying a large amount of violence here, compared to, this is a sport, and we don't want blood spurting out everywhere all over somebody's face. But having said that, I think right now it's been toned down a little bit too much, and actually damage, swelling, cuts, and blood is actually on our list of things to work on, right? So we will be making some changes about the whole, the system with swelling and cuts, to bring it up a few levels. So I think, again, we've probably played it a little bit too safe in that space. So yeah, as far as that whole aspect goes, expect to see that being ramped up.
Okay. What about Frazier? Because Joe Frazier had a really uh, dynamic left hook, or a really like polarizing left hook that was different from everyone else's, and it was the gazelle, the gazelle left hook. What happened to that? Why is that no longer in the game, but it was in our previous trailer videos?
I was
So
afraid I scared Ash about this one, because I kept talking about like the way that it was mapped on there, which was like just any forward hook, right? And so I was concerned, like, oh, you could accidentally, just unintentionally do this hook. And then I had Coach's Corner over here at one point, and we were playing, and he was using Ollie, and I was using Razor, and I was like, oh, it's actually not that bad. I didn't find myself unintentionally hooking, and so I thought it was going to be in, and then we shipped into early access, and it wasn't there anymore. And I think I had been telling people, oh yeah, it's still there. And so, oops, my bad. We did take it out.
yeah, so I mean, so the good news is it is coming back in. But the reason why it was taken out was, again, it was another one of these situations where I just feel like obviously we're aiming for a really high quality bar, and the leaping left Joe Frazier hook, like 8 times out of 10, it looked good, and we're trying to get to a place where 10 out of 10 it looks good, or 10 out of 10 it works, and the issue that we had was, because it was, like a leaping left hook from Frazier, we were struggling to make it land or look actually effective every single time, where because of our physics system, sometimes it looked pretty funky. So having said that, we do have a working, solid looking Joe Frazier left hook that we will be bringing back in, because look, he's one of my favorite heavyweights, and putting that in to begin with, I liked how it was playing, and even some of the knockouts that we got in the game from that leaping left hook looked pretty cool. But yeah, it's just one of those scenarios where it didn't always look great, and I'm not going to be comfortable with putting anything out if that's the case. So yeah, we'll be putting that back in.
Okay, all right. And another thing that I seen them talk about, and we have it here on the list, is the muscle flex of the fighters. They don't to a lot of people, they're stating that they don't look as good as they did in previous videos. So what's going on with that? Is it a thing that's different, or is it the camera, the lighting? What's going on?
So it's a combination of a couple of things really. So one is yeah, we toned it down just a little bit. But I think the biggest impact is again down to the camera, with it being further away. I think with those videos where the the muscles were flexing, and even the chins were wobbling, right, in some of those other videos when people were getting hit in the face. Um, yeah, I think some of that is definitely down to the camera just being further away. But at the same time, I think we can make some adjustments to uh, bring that back out again. So it really highlights those muscles.
It's interesting how much cameras really do make a difference, because I think one
Yeah.
of the other things like people would say over, it's not on this list, but it just made me think about it, is like, people would talk about like the inside fighting. And they'd say, when are you going to put in what I've seen here in the video? And it's like, well, that's what's in our game right now. But it just, to people, it just looks different. That first video that we showed with the inside fighting stuff, it just looks so different because of the camera placement, and the punches look more intense. They look faster when you're up closer. It's really interesting how much that makes a difference.
Yeah, it makes so much of a difference to me that I don't play in the default camera. I always play dolly ringside, and a lot of people have noticed that I play that way through the let's play that we've put out. But that's my favorite because you get in certain angles and the camera's right up against you, and you really feel the action a little bit more in those scenarios. And it does look different. Like, it's visually different for me, the way the fighters look, the way everything looks, the way the contact looks. So I could see why, having the camera pulled back a little bit can cause, things to look like, oh, I don't see muscle flexion, but yeah, I see a lot of stuff going on when I'm in like those corners and the camera's right next to me. So I think a camera change, or adding different cameras, or bringing back that camera and somehow making it work so that you don't get that, like the spinning thing that we used to have with that. I think that could definitely assist with the muscle flexion. But another thing that's not necessarily so much visual or graphic related is the critical zones. I think that that's something that's interesting because it's hard to pinpoint if it's working, because you don't know if you actually, things are happening so fast. Did you actually hit somebody, in the center of their heads or in the temple? So what about that? What's going on? Is critical zones still a thing that's in the game?
Absolutely, yes. So we have three zones on a boxer's face, and those zones will uh, determine how much damage a boxer is taking. Um, a really high critical zone, like on the temple, for example, would increase the chance of having a flash knockout or a flash knockdown. So critical zones are definitely still on the fighters. But I think this kind of forms part of something a little bit wider for us, and that is we are looking at ways to kind of improve the on-screen UI and information that the player receives. And critical zones is part of that, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of mechanics like working behind the scenes that players don't know about, or you're not really getting that feedback on screen. So that is something we're actively looking at the moment in terms of how can we bring that forward to a player so they know essentially what is happening on the screen, other than seeing somebody get punched in the face, because there's, like I said, a lot of things that are working behind the scenes. So yeah, we have critical zones around the chin, around the temple, because I didn't want a flash knockout to occur from just a glancing blow, right? So critical zones are absolutely in the game. But yeah, we're just looking at ways to further, I guess, better communicate that to the players.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, One other thing too that's kind of like just off the wall with this, Rakol's gold trunks. Like, what happened to that? Because he used to, he used to have gold trunks before, and now it looks like it's just yellow with like a black lining on the side. So what happened with his trunks?
So that actually was down to one of the materials was actually selected incorrectly. So he actually had the wrong materials on the shorts, which made them look the way they did. But look, if people preferred those and they want those shorts back in, then maybe we put the wrong materials back on again.
So it was an accident kind of that people loved. Yeah, I guess it's the metallic look. Some people like that, some people like the other look, but I could see they're probably just bringing that up because of the difference that they see now. And then another one, I think this is the last thing we're going to touch on the things that people have been talking about in terms of seeing things change. What about the Usyk side dodge? I think the trailer that announced the game to release the release date trailer had the side dodge in there where Usyk did a side dodge, and then I think he was fighting Fury and he ended up on his side and he was able to hit him with some combinations. What happened with that? Because that's not the side dodge that he currently has now.
So with that side dodge, there were one or two little issues that were occurring, and again, similar to the Joe Frazier piece where it didn't look perfect every single time. It got replaced with a different motion capture that we had. But we do have a number of side dodges, and with that particular one, we'll be looking to make one or two tweaks to it before it goes back in onto Usyk.
Okay.
I've got one more, Ed.
Oh, you got another one?
Thanks,
well,
Phil.
it's technically on the list, but I think you skipped past it because we already sort of talked about it. But I want to make sure we're totally clear because we talk so much about cameras. And I think one of the things people are wondering about is like, well, we thought there were going to be a bunch of camera angles. I think we actually put out one of our dev updates that wasn't a video. I want to say it was probably like August 2021 or something like that, where we talked about experimenting with camera angles. And then I think actually some of this is our fault, Ed, because we put out that video last year of Terrence Crawford.
Like
and we used like all these experimental camera angles. And so, I mean, look, this is just one of those things that happens. Edward and I we got a build. It had the angles in it. We were using them.
By the way, before you say that, we played in those camera angles. I've gotten a lot of people message me saying you had to have recorded it and then put that camera after. No, we played in those camera angles like while it was happening.
No, we did. And if you guys saw Edward beating on me, that was all just part of the performance, just so you know.
Don't worry.
But no, I mean, it was experimental camera angles, and then it was kind of like we had this discussion at the time. It's like, oh, we're not going to be able to ship these for the start of early access, and we're just like, yeah, but the video, it looks cool. Like we didn't want to redo it, so we put them out there, and we're just. It's just another thing on the roadmap is adding more camera angles. But it is the kind of thing we don't just throw them out there because we don't want them to be totally broken. And thing is when you make videos like that, like you see our complete video, but you don't see that we spent like a whole week making that video, working around all kind of broken stuff. Like some people are like, this is one of the funny things I think when I think about that video is I'll see people talk about the knockdowns. They're like, the knockdowns look so good in that video, and it's like, yeah, because we cut all of them before the fighter hit the floor because they were also broken. And we're just like, yeah, we got to cut them earlier. So yeah, I mean, knockdown, sure, that's another thing that we can can work on and that we're going to give attention to. But yeah, sometimes it's just when you're making a game that early on and you're playing it right out of the editor and stuff like that, like it's not like you're playing the game the way we're playing it now, where there's like a version of the game we feel is good enough to ship. Like we're just setting up different scenarios, and then it's like, I mean, if we need to show somebody get knocked out, like there's like a setting that we can use, the guy just gets knocked out, right? And that's different than playing a game that's like where we are, where it's in early access and we're shipping it. And so that's why some stuff just looks a little bit different, is just because that's what you do when you're making a video.
It's the magic of editing.
And the magic of editing, where we're just like, oh, the game is real buggy right now because we're focused on making the game, not cleaning up all the bugs at that point.
Well, anyway. Look, I think it's probably a reason why, a lot of game studios don't release alpha and, early footage whilst they're developing a game, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not in a shippable state. So, you won't be getting huge titles that are going into the same amount of depth as I feel like we went into.
Yeah.
So there is an element of, yeah, it's like, if the game, if we recorded everything unedited, 2 years ago, or a year ago, then it's like, well, if we're able to record it unedited in its entirety, then it should be ready to ship, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
clearly the game wasn't in that
But
state.
also,
So
yeah, and also, I mean, it's, the video is meant to show progress and things that we're working on and that we think look cool, and we show those things. But, watching a video where you see a sequence for a few seconds is a lot different than playing the game. And I think, for some people, there's the perception that's like, oh, this game's a totally different game than it was, or maybe it was better to play back then. But I don't think anybody on this call would want to go back
No.
to the 2 years ago 2 years ago
The
game. Not
game
that
is
it
much
was,
more.
not that it was
Yeah,
bad, but it's like our
yeah,
game is much better game
much better.
today than it was at that point. Anyway, hey, we made it through the second topic. Only took us like 20 minutes to get through that one
20.
topic. I guess now we can get into some of the other stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So,
uh,
yeah, I was gonna say, the next thing that we're gonna talk about is game balancing, relating to how stamina and damage can be better tuned. Why has that been such a difficult task to complete? Is there anything? Can't we just change a slider here or there, or turn something on and off and make it just an easier experience in terms of damage and stamina? Or is there just something else that needs to happen?
I wish it were that easy. It would make my job a
Just
lot
press a button.
easier about explaining about how we handle that stuff. But I mean, I think the first thing is that, like, so we have a vision for the game that we're making around authentic boxing, right? And we have a game that's in early access right now, which means it's not finished, and we're working on these areas. And there's some things that are just going to feel rough until we've done certain things, or there's some things that we just have to react to with feedback. So, like, I guess the first thing is, like, when you think about balance of stamina and damage, because those are the two things that people talk a lot about. Sometimes what we hear from players is like, I can just throw too many punches in a game, or it's not consequential enough. My opponent was able to throw too much. They didn't pay for it. They weren't tired. Or damage is, I can't damage people enough with counters, or I can't damage, enough with this particular fighter that, I want to utilize. And I guess the first thing is, like, we can say we want those things to feel consequential, right? And that we know that the game that is live right now, that they maybe don't feel as consequential as we would like. And those are things that we're working on. But some of them require us to take a hard look at some of the systems and how the systems work, because it's not as simple as, let me just change this one value. It's a thing that we have to think about. And then, there's a part of this too that's like, well, you also go to places like PAX, where it's not all the hardcore players, and then we realize, oh, people that play our game are having a totally different experience than the folks that we're talking to are online, or that we have, right? Some people would refer to that as a casual audience, if you will. And so, like, I'm at PAX and I'm just like, oh, like, we're over here worried about damage and stamina, not being too much, and then I see people just hitting the buttons and they're out of stamina in 5 seconds, and they keep hitting the buttons, not realizing they're out of stamina. So, like, I think for us, there's a goal of, our game vision is around authentic boxing, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what we're going to deliver. We also find the ways to be thoughtful about how do we make our game a little more accessible in terms of, like, how people onboard onto that. And so, in some sense, right now, we actually haven't mastered that for either audience, right? We haven't, for the person that comes in and they hit buttons and they're out of stamina and they don't realize what's happening, we haven't landed it for that audience. And for our core audience that goes in, we haven't, mastered the consequential feeling of risk versus reward. And so, yeah, I mean, Ash, if you want to talk maybe a little bit about just like some of how we approach that, but I think people are saying it doesn't feel consequential enough or right, and it's because we have these things that we're kind of like parallel pathing in terms of how we work with different audiences of players that will play the game, and that's work's just not all done yet.
Yeah, I think as you've just said there, Will, the two audiences, whether you're casual, whether you're hardcore boxing fan, I think the game that we're creating here, has always been about you're playing the game. If you're into boxing, and if you make a mistake, then expect to get punished. The whole thing about getting hit and not getting hit, it's kind of part of the fabric of our game. And I think, as you've just said there, watching people pick up the controller and just button mash for a few rounds and still have fun, and not really care about all that kind of stuff. It's for us, it's a case of really sticking to what we really care about, and that is having an authentic boxing game. So I think in terms of balancing stamina, it's always been a case of not making it like too punishing, but then there's a whole other half of an audience that would say that it's we haven't gone far enough with it. And I think that goes to the same way with damage, and things like getting knocked out from counter punches. So I think for us, there's a lot of changes that are coming in that space as far as stamina and damage go, but there will be, a number of iterations. We are carrying out a full review of the game, as far as, how the different game modes feel. At the moment, obviously with casual and simulation, we want there to be a clear, separation, with regards to how that, how our game feels. So, as far as stamina usage goes, damage, we will be making some changes in the following updates, which players will be able to find the right balance for them, right? If they feel like it's too difficult for them, then there'll be things in there they'll be able to change, and vice versa. If things are a little bit too easy, then players will be able to change some of those sliders. So it is important one for us.
And some of that it's not going to be a thing that happens overnight, right? Like we're probably, going to make some changes, but I think some of the larger systemic stuff is stuff that will take time, right? So I don't think it doesn't feel to me like the sort of thing that's like, oh, yep, all of a sudden this is just a thing that's fixed. I think it is complex and it needs a lot of work. I do want to make sure we're clear about, like, when we think about those audiences, though, that when we think about a casual audience, it doesn't mean, like, for us, we actually think authentic boxing is fun, right? So
yeah, 100%.
So when we explain to people, when we're at PAX and I'm showing a player or I'm showing the media the game, like, it's not an either or thing. It's just more about how do we onboard people and on-ramp them into caring about the things that make the game authentic. So onboarding them to understand and care about the consequence of being missed. Like, why would you appreciate the sort of setting things up versus I just want to go in and hit buttons. I'm sure there's a way for people to enjoy that experience on a low difficulty setting or something like that, but we think that people actually are gonna care about the authentic boxing experience, even if they're a new player, that's a thing that people want to work toward and be a part of. So for us, we don't really see it as an either or thing. But right now, with where the game is at, we just don't think that we think that both audiences, we have not mastered our ability to provide that kind of experience and ramp up to that. And that's why we need to work on it.
Yeah, and even in a microcosm in terms of how a casual player experiences the game on the different levels, like just to even the PAX kind of thing that you reference, and not to toot my own horn here, I when playing against somebody, like they'll play against each other, And then every once in a while, somebody would want to play against me because I'm standing there and, you know, they want to know something. They might know who I am. So they'll play with me and they're entertained by fighting each other and just blasting at each other. But then when I'm playing against them and I'm doing all of these different intricate things and moving my head, and they're entertained by the prospect of that as well. They're like, whoa, what's going on? How are you doing that? How are you moving here? How are you moving over there? So there's like, even between the casual audience, there seems to still be an appreciation to the deeper level stuff, even if they can't get there just yet. So I think if we, you know, focus on the authentic boxing element of it, I think it'll pull even the casual fans if we go in that direction. So I do 100% agree on that. Also, one thing about the updates, a couple of updates ago, we had a few different fighter rating changes, or almost like a sweeping change for a lot of different fighters. But we have seen there's been much less of that. So what's the plan with handling ratings moving forward? Since, you know, we did it before, are we still doing that? Are we still focusing on that?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I think 2 updates ago we had a bunch of ratings changes. Most of them were in heavyweight, and I think the way we've thought about that is, you know, trying to align with you know, making the changes that matter the most, right? So heavyweight's like the most popular division in our game. We did a pass on that. We opened up the Discord where people were talking about it, saying, "Hey, you guys have got a few things really wrong," and we agreed. And so we made some of those changes. And then I think this last time it was mostly about fixing Amir Khan, because you know, we had him a little out the gate, a little too powerful, a little too tough. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk about this just mainly because, you know, I don't want people to be confused about like, hey, why would you do a bunch of ratings and then next time you've got a few? I mean, I think ratings, frankly, for us is a pretty challenging thing, and part of that is just because we are a small company, right? So it's not like we've got the ratings guru who sits all the time and focuses on these things. As much as we're boxing fans, some of it has been just kind of like a best effort, you know, that we can get it to a place where it feels acceptable, knowing that it's not perfect and that it's not, you know, it's not full release shippable yet when it comes to ratings. So what's going to happen is that over the time, as Ash talked about, there being like a full review of different areas of the game, there's going to be a point where we look at the ratings and we say, okay, this is like our real concerted path that we're going to make, to, you know, as we've gotten a bunch more fighters in, to make sure that the ratings make sense, that they honor the fighters, that the fighters really feel like they have strengths and weaknesses. And it's just one of those things where right now it's like, again, if it's on a list of 10 things, you know, then it kind of feels like you're not treating it as important as it is. You know, and you know, when it's a thing that you focus on and can make it, you know, make sure that we have a time and a process to really hone in on it. I think it'll make a difference in terms of what you see when the game is shipped. But yeah, right now it's a little bit of a collective effort with a few of us. I won't name any names because I don't want any of us to get those specific comments towards us. But but yeah, there's things that we're going to do to improve that process and checks in order to make sure that it's not just somebody's hot take and that we feel really good about the ratings that are going to ship in the full game. But always, you know, always helpful to keep dropping in those comments in Discord too, because we do look at them. And if there's something that feels like, oh, you're right, that's really egregious, then we want to handle that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, perfectly said. The now let's go on to, this is gonna be my favorite.
Oh, this is exciting.
This is my favorite
the
topic.
exciting part.
So the last update we did, and I know you guys are gonna love this. The last update we did, it featured a small change on the step back straight. So now you can't just pop them super quickly. Sometimes if you did it quick enough, you could almost stay in place and throw two before you start moving. Now you throw it, you have to complete the animation. It actually steps you back so you get out of range. So it definitely helps the front foot fighter. But big but a lot of people are still saying they want more tools. They want to be able to do more things to move forward and to try to do something to close the gap when it comes to a front foot fighter versus a back foot fighter. What's the next steps in terms of balancing out on the fighting on the front foot versus fighting on the back foot? And I know the
So
answer, but I
so I think, we did speak about this in one of our previous videos, right? Where we feel
yeah.
like the game is quite, it's a little bit skewed towards the back foot fighter, right? So if you're a tall fighter with a long reach and you fight off the back foot, it's actually really difficult for the opponent to close that distance, if they haven't got the same advantages as you. So one of the things that we're really excited about is in the next update that's coming. Fighters will be able to move forward whilst slipping a punch, and they'll actually be able to do that in both directions. So you'll be able to move forward and slip left, and move forward and slip right. So um, you know, that really works well with shorter fighters who don't have that long reach and need to close the ground pretty quickly. So somebody like Joe Frazier is absolutely perfect for, where you can slip under those punches whilst you are actually moving forward. So I think that's a really, really, really important kind of weapon in a fighter's arsenal, where they're able to close that distance down, slip a punch, and come up with an uppercut or a hook. So it's no longer just a case of being able to dodge in 4 different directions. You'll be able to dodge diagonally left and diagonally right. So that's something that we're really excited about, and we think it's going to close the gap in that area of back foot fighting being kind of like a preferred route in Undisputed. So yeah, if you're fighting off the back foot all the time, then prepare to get challenged with the new mechanic that's about to drop.
Yeah.
Frazier and Marciano players unite.
Yeah, and one thing that I love, because the thing with me is what I love about Undisputed, and I've always loved this about the game, even when earlier, it wasn't as fleshed out as it was now, but it's the creativity element of it, right? Because to me, it has a sandbox feel to it once you like play and tinker and lab with all of the different mechanics of the game. And when you add this element of diagonal dodging, you're opening up the sandbox to so many more different possibilities and different opportunities. I mean, I'm doing stuff like pull counter, hitting the straight over the top, ducking and escaping onto my left while the other guy's hitting with the forward step right hook, and they're missing completely. I'm turning and I'm able to, capitalize, get another counter off of it. So it's more than just the sum of its parts. It gives that ability for people to experiment and play, and it opens up the floor a little bit more. So that's what makes me super excited about it. I mean, I've seen people, like, even when I'm playing against the CPU, they're trying to kind of escape a little bit, and I could just cut them off so quickly because I'm getting right in front of them immediately as they're trying to move to the side. So just the usage of it is the most exciting thing to me, and I can't wait till other people get it. And like you said, the next update, right? That's when it's coming out.
Yes, yes, coming out the next update. Yep.
So yeah,
My neck's on the line now. I've
next
said
update,
that.
guys.
Yep.
So it's just a fun mechanic overall. I love it. Will, how have you been using it? Because I know me and you've been playing with it like crazy.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I mean, some of the stuff you mentioned cutting off the ring, or just getting under on the inside, because of course I tried with some of the fighters that you would think to use that with, like Frazier, and one of the things I also thought about was it makes me more likely to use power shots, because when you throw a power shot in our game, you're sort of rooted, right? And so it can make you vulnerable. And so the best places to throw power shots from are, at an off angle. And so, like, for example, with Frazier, do that diagonal left, and then throw the power hook off of that. And I like how seamless it feels to me to be able to do that and be in a position where I feel like it's safe for me to throw this punch. I'm at less risk of being able to throw this, of being able to get hit when I throw this punch. So it's cool when you talk about creativity, but it's like sometimes you'll add a thing into the game that makes other parts of the game that are already there better.
Yeah.
And I think this might be one of those things. Of course, again, we're all excited about it. When it gets out into the wild, we'll
But
see
we want
how
to know what you guys feel.
it goes. It's always different when you're playing, internally and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And then when thousands of people get it in their hands, they do all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't expect, and some of those things could be really cool, and some of them could be bad. So I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see when we ship it. But I'm excited just because I think like it adds a dimension to the game that's not there right now, and it'll give people a tool to play around with, and hopefully get more out of the fighters and elements of the game that are already there.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, it's awesome. Like I would use the check hooks to move my fighter, but now I don't have to commit with a punch. I could just be close and use that diagonal dodge, and it'll step to the left or step to the right. So to me, I think it was just, for me, it's one of the best, yeah, that we've put in terms of game mechanics. So now, what do we think when we read about gameplay mechanics suggestions such as a vulnerability system, like putting in a vulnerability system, like if somebody misses a punch or they're in the middle of a punch and they get hit and all that stuff, like where are we with that? How do we feel about that?
Yeah, I think the reason to talk about it, right, is just because it's a thing people keep mentioning, and so like I think Ash is probably better off to talk about the specifics of how we think about it. But I think it kind of what we can acknowledge is that it ties to the risk reward thing, right? Is that people wanting the risk reward? That's why we think people are saying to us, make vulnerability a feature, is that they want to see that. And there's just certain fighters where that could feel more consequential, right? Like we bring Deontay Wilder up all the time as somebody that we think, yeah, we haven't quite nailed Deontay Wilder yet. Right now, it feels a little bit more like high volume of punches in the game, or combinations is the way to hurt somebody and knock them out. Where in reality, you have fighters that, yep, you put yourself out there and you get a big massive shot in return, and you're knocked down, knocked out. I think that's why people are asking about it. I think it definitely is a great point about the game and how what we want the experience to be. And then yeah, Ash can talk about the specifics of how do we think about that and how does it work with all these complex systems that we've already got now.
Yeah, I mean that system is something we've spoken about previously internally, and we we thought about using our critical zones as a way of utilizing a similar system to that. But I think the way it's panned out, it does need its own almost mechanic, and we are actually looking at various designs as far as having a system like that. So we've drawn up a few things. So that vulnerability system, it is something that we're actively looking at the moment, and implementing that with all of the other systems in our game. So it won't be a case of like replacing a system or taking something out. It'll be complementing mainly the critical zones that we have in the game right now. So it could be where, if you're midway through throwing a big power shot and you get hit in a critical zone, then obviously that'll have a significant chance of, causing a high amount of damage or a knockdown. So it is a system that we have thought about for quite some time, but we think it's the right time to start implementing something like that.
Yeah, but wet paint in terms of exactly what it will be, right? Because it does have to work with the other systems that we already
Yeah.
already have.
Let me go ahead and touch on this one because this one actually, funny that I skipped it, but it's one of my most important things that I care about with the game. How is our work to make online a more stable experience coming along in terms of desync, and there's a lot of people using certain like things to cheat online and stuff like that. So where are we with online stability overall?
So as we've spoken about this on a number of roundtables, right? Where we've been speaking about we're getting an additional resource. We're working with another expert in the online space to help us resolve some of these issues. And I'm pleased to say that in the next update, we are going to be dropping some improvements in the online space. It's not the final fix, or the big fix that will make everything perfect, but there will be some improvements to people's online experience. So with the next update that will be going out, there'll be essentially an improvement in terms of desync, an improvement in terms of the amount of ghost punches that you see. So we're pretty excited about the online improvements that are coming. But again, it's just the first of a few. So yeah, expect the online experience to improve in the next update, and then we're obviously continually working with our partners to further improve that in future updates to come.
All right. And so now we finally got into our final question, but this one is super important actually, because, and I'm very interested in this answer, because the offline experience to a lot of players is essential when it comes to Undisputed. That's what they care about more. Not everyone cares about online as much as, the next guy, but there's people that care a lot about that offline experience. So why haven't we heard anything about career mode, creative fighter? What's going on with that stuff?
Yeah,
Will,
I mean,
tell us.
yeah. The short answer is it's just not time yet, right? We think showing is better than just talking about it. I think as we move closer to the time when those modes will release in the game, for sure we're going to show things, show bits and pieces of them so that everybody understands what they're all about. And we're kind of at a stage also with the game now where things have changed a little bit in terms of how we talk about things. I mean, we referenced those dev update videos from a couple of years ago, and we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit, because right now we're like shipping updates every few weeks, and then we talk about what's in them. And so it's been less of feeling like, hey, let's talk about a thing that's coming at some point down the line in the future, in terms of like seeing it with video. And of course today we're given a little teaser about the diagonal dodge. But yeah, I mean, I think we're entering this state now where it's like it's a little more thought put around some of those things. We have a publisher now. You guys have probably seen some of the videos that they're helping us put out, like our fighter videos when we release updates, like our Calzaghe one or the Lomachenko one. And so I would expect that we try to put out something that's a little more polished as we make progress towards some of the major features in the game. Career is kind of a major thing. Like we want it to feel like a major thing when we start talking about it. Probably talk, do interviews with media and things like that that you would traditionally do. So yeah, I mean, if you're patiently waiting on that, thank you. I'm sorry we don't have news today about career and creative fighter, but we are actively working on those features. We're excited to be able to show and share more, and we will make as much noise as we can when it's time to talk about them.
Oh, there you go. So that ends this record-breaking round table. Guys, please leave topics, comments, things that you guys are concerned about down in the comment section below. We definitely want to get your feedback. It helps us with these roundtables when we put them together. And of course, as always, from the Steel City Interactive team, peace out. We love you. Bye.